Good morning, EDFI students. It's me. I'm Dr. Mariner. Don't call me doctor. What? Mariner's fine. Sorry, that's weird. That's a weird start. I'm trying something new this semester. I thought maybe I would post a video at the beginning of the week to get us started on some of the modules and some of the topics, mostly in response to the previous week's discussion, so I can sort of directly engage the work you're all doing. And so I'm going to try to keep it under 10 minutes every week. I know you're busy. I know part of doing an online class is flexibility. You don't have time to sit through an hour and a half class. So this first one might be a little long, so we have some housekeeping stuff to take care of. But I'd like to do this every week because one of my the evaluations for this course last semester, there was some concerns that there wasn't enough direct instruction. And so hopefully these videos will help you all hear some thoughts as opposed to me just responding to your individual thoughts every week because I post grades. Now, okay, so let's do some housekeeping first. First of all, the discussion boards for last week. Overall, I was pretty pleased. Really interested in your initial thoughts here for the semester. Some of these first topics for the course, you know, it's hard to get started in a class like this where what you're thinking about. I will say, right off the bat, and I think this applies to every person who posted this week, we need to see more direct engagement with the readings that's been assigned. I know in particular with this question of ideology in schools, Horton and Ferrari had some very specific things to say, and the mention to the assigned reading was pretty sparse. So as we move forward this semester, you make sure that you're referencing the reading. I think I said this more than anything in all of my responses to you all in your work, is that your classmates and I need to be able to follow your train of thought. And the easiest way for us to do that is if you reference where you drew your ideas from. So what part of the reading made you think this? Otherwise, it just, a couple things. One, that helps your classmates and I follow along with the way you're putting together your ideas. But two, just in terms of sort of like bureaucratically, for me to grade you, it provides evidence that you're doing the work on your end, right? That you've done the reading, you've thought about the reading, and that the ideas you're putting together come from course material. Otherwise, it just sort of looks like, oh, you took the prompt and ran with it, you know, like it's a, YouTube cat video. These discussion boards are expected to be a little bit more academic than just, you reflecting on a prompt with no reference to anything. Like all of the prompts are intended for you to be able to make some reference to the course material. So that's probably my one overarching comment on that. Remember to make your comments to your classmates, your responses by Friday that you do, make sure that those are constructive, make sure that they're helpful, but make sure they're also thoughtful, right? I agree is not good enough, right? What do you agree with? What about what they said? And for the most part, I thought this week, to start off, we were doing a pretty good job with that. You have a paper due this week. You have a paper due Friday. That paper is an autobiography assignment. Again, do time. Let's not freak out about that. I'll wake up Saturday morning, make a cup of coffee, check the Blackboard page. If they're all there, they're on time. Okay. The purpose of this assignment is for you to reflect on your own schooling experience. It doesn't have to be any more complicated than that. And I don't offer much more direction than that because I want you to reflect on whatever you want to reflect on. If you want to think about your entire schooling experience, that's fine. If there's some one particular element of school that you really want to think about and write about, if there's some horrific teacher you had and you're just waiting for somebody to come along and give you the chance to describe how bad they were, you can spend 5 pages on that. That's totally fine. The most important part of this paper is that not that you just describe your schooling experience, but then you talk about why you think that's important. Why is it that when you think back about school, you remember this particular teacher and how good or bad they were? That's by far the most common thing talked about in this assignment. Why is it that you think about a sports team you were on and you don't really remember ever anything from class, but you remember being on the volleyball team? Like, why is that important? Why is people who are about to become teachers, why do you think it's important that when you look back at school, you remember A, B, and C, whatever you choose to write about? Right? You might choose to say, like, I don't remember school at all. I don't remember a thing I learned. I hated school, and here's why. That's fine to say also, as long as then you spend some time explaining what do you think you can learn from that as a teacher moving forward, as somebody who's trying to become a teacher. Yeah, so it's an open-ended assignment for that purpose. I'm not going to tell you you have remembered your life incorrectly. I'm not going to call all your teachers and make sure that you're telling me the truth. I only want you to write about what you want to write about from what it looked like starting in kindergarten, moving up to Friday at 2 a.m. when you're writing it. Or whatever. It's up to you to decide what you want to write about. For full credit, I want you to write why you think those are important things. Why is it important that that's what stands out in your memory about school? Okay, so that's it. Now, let's talk about the topic for last week and some of my thoughts based on your responses to get us thinking about where we're headed in the coming weeks of this semester. One of the things that I asked you to think about and write about was this idea of schools as ideological spaces. Does ideology come into play in education? And the simple fact of the matter, the simplest answer to that question is yes, right? It's impossible not to. All education is a political act. That is important enough to say twice. All education is a political act, whether you want it to be or not. I think it's it's sort of a voguish thing for pre-service teachers to say, like, well, I'm not going to do politics in my classroom. I'm just going to teach what they tell me to teach. Well, that in itself is, of course, a political choice. You are making a choice to just go along. Now, I'm not asking you all to become radical disestablishmentarianists, right? To go in and buck the system on your first day. In fact, that's entirely dangerous for an untenured teacher to do. However, I do want us to think about all of the various ideologies at play when we go in to teach, no matter what you teach. Even if you're teaching kindergarten, even if you're teaching just basic reading and writing, or if you're teaching a biology class or a math class that seems to be entirely independent of politics, you're just teaching fractions. You are always in the act of making a choice, right? To either teach what you're being told or to develop some sort of, to implement or bring into your class what's going on in the world around you and your students. Horton and Ferrari in the reading, they asked this question, can you ever just teach biology? And I love that question because essentially what they say is you shouldn't. But there's some caveats there, right? You can't just go in every day and implement whatever your politics are, and it doesn't matter what your politics are for the sake of this conversation. If it's if you find yourself more conservative or more progressive, if your politics are based around your faith or your politics are based around, I don't know, what's the opposite of that? Whatever the opposite of that is, just I'm like, if you're an environmentalist or whatever, or if you want to bring feminism into your classroom, or if you want to bring, anything into your classroom that could be engaging politics. You can't go in, if you're going to teach a biology class, let's use their example, and today you have to teach cellular structures, right? You can't go in and say, I'm not going to talk about cellular structures today. I'm going to talk about, the most recent shooting in the news because I think I want to talk about gun control today. Your students are going to say to you, this is a biology class. I don't want to hear it. They might want to talk about it, but they are fully within their abilities to say, I don't want to talk about gun control today. This is a biology class. And more importantly, maybe not more importantly, but as importantly, your administrators are going to say, you're not doing your job. We hired you to teach biology, right? And we didn't hire you to rile up your students about gun control or gun rights or either or. But if you go in and say, I'm only, this thing that's in the news that all my students want to talk about, and they're very distracted, I'm going to go in today and tell them the world around you doesn't matter. The only thing in the world that matters is biology today, and I need to tell you about cellular mitosis or whatever. I have a social studies background. I don't teach science. Sorry if you do. Your world around you is irrelevant. This class and this subject and my test is the only thing that matters. You're also putting yourself in the position to distance yourself from your students. You're missing an opportunity to engage students in the world around them. So the basic answer is no, you can't ever just teach biology. You have to bring in what's going on. Now, am I asking you, or do Horton and Ferrari ask you to brainwash your students into your politics? Of course not, right? Of course not. That's not what we're talking about here. What we're asking is that we acknowledge that schools are nested within a social structure, a government, a society, and they don't operate within a vacuum. And we must acknowledge that as teachers, that kids are going to be bringing their ideas into the class. Those ideas are going to come from their parents. Sometimes those ideas are going to come from their friends or the internet or wherever. I lose sleep at night over what my kids see on the internet. And that we have to be prepared to engage it while doing our jobs, because you have to teach. And the strictures on teachers and what you have to teach in a day continue to get tighter and tighter. And if you don't do that part, you'll lose the job. So you have to, what we're going to talk about this semester is how do you walk that tightrope, because it's tricky. And then, there's another thing to think about, and I encourage you as we move on this semester to think about it, and that's the idea that even if you're just teaching math, even if there's no way for us to talk, I have to teach compound fractions today, and that's devoid of ideology and politics, right? All I'm doing is teaching calculations. That's true to a degree, but you also have to acknowledge that you're operating within the school itself, as I just said, is operating within a system. And we have a system in the United States that is still based on those ideas that we talked about from the founders. Most importantly, capitalism and republicanism. You are operating in a school that is designed to produce citizens and workers. That is what public education is intended for. Think of public school as an investment. We pay for it with tax dollars. The government provides it for free for most of its citizens, and that providing of a free education is an investment. They've invested in future citizens. I think I might have said this to some of you in my comments. One of my